Grant writing is one of the most powerful skills you can have. It is the ability to draw attention to the challenges we're facing as a community and detail a plan for a better future. When successful, a partnership forms to provide financial resources that make that vision a reality. Hi, my name is Allison Shirk, and I'm a grant writing professor and the founder of Spark the Fire grant writing classes. This 1 hour class provides practical tools, a roadmap to every section of your grant proposal, and a guide for taking your writing from good to great. Let's acknowledge that you can't learn grant writing in 1 hour. I do hope to give you enough tips to move forward right now. At the end of the video, you'll find a list of resources for continuing to learn grant writing, including information about earning an assessment-based certificate in grant writing through Spark the Fire grant writing classes. I hope that in sharing with you what I have learned in over 20 years of writing grants, it will help you find your way as a grant writer and ultimately help you get the funding you need for your project for your community. If you break it down into its most basic parts, a grant proposal has 5 sections: the organizational description, your organization's qualifications, your mission statement, your vision, its history, the community needs statement, the research and the data that there is a challenge to embrace or an opportunity, the project budget, what funding is needed for, and the fundraising plan to get there, the project description, the plan, the timeline, the team. And finally, the evaluation section. How will you determine that your project was a success? But then what? Once the basics are written down, students often say to me, I've written some grants and they were funded, but I still don't really feel like I know what I'm doing. How do I take my writing to the next level? What does it take to go from good to great? Well, it's 2 things. It's how you frame your proposal and strategy. It's getting to what I like to call the of course factor. We are going to take those 5 basic parts of your proposal and make them powerful. Tell a powerful story when we describe the organization. Find some powerful research to support the community needs statement. Demonstrate a powerful connection between the project budget and the project outcomes. Create powerful imagery with your project description. Demonstrate a powerful impact with a strong evaluation plan. Pause for a moment and write down one thing that your organization does that really makes you proud. Just one thing. In fact, imagine that you're at a dinner party and someone asks what your organization does. What would you say? If a 5-year-old heard this, would they understand what you mean? Or was it written with jargon? Does your passion about it come through? Or is it written in a dry, unemotional way? Can you tell a story about it with a character as your hero who goes on a quest or a journey? Would a grant maker read this and say, of course I want to fund this? Rewrite if you need to, and then let's set this aside for just a moment. Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for his groundbreaking work in psychology, specifically his theory on framing, along with his research partner, Amos Tversky. Kahneman found that most people make quick decisions based on their intuition and emotions. That intuition is not always correct. In fact, decisions people make can be pretty predictable and predictably wrong. People make these quick decisions rather than making slow, rational decisions 95% of the time. Why is that important? Because they found that people's decisions can be swayed by how a situation is framed. If a person likes something, they're more likely to invest in it. If a person has an emotional connection to something, they're more likely to take an interest in it. And isn't that our job as grant writers? To write in a way that helps people form a connection to what we're writing about. Further, when a person can see a logical connection between something that they know, like, or feel an emotional connection to, the more likely they're going to want to be a part of it or fund it. Let's go back to what you wrote down earlier. Follow that statement with the words so that. Here's an example. Our organization recruits volunteers to clean up the trash around the river and educate tourists about the importance of treating our rivers with respect so that the river doesn't get polluted with trash, so that wildlife continues to thrive, so that individuals can enjoy the river without harming it, so that the river can continue to be a place to go to connect with nature, so that we are healthy mentally and physically, so that we live a happy, healthy life. Hit pause and recreate your so that progression. By creating a so that progression, the focus remains on the outcomes rather than the activities. The activities of your organization were never intended to be ends in themselves. Using the words so that changes the way you frame your proposal. It focuses on the outcomes that result from your work rather than the organization itself. When grant reviewers are using their fast, intuitive thinking, framing is critical. But what about when grant reviewers are using their slow, rational thinking? While the emotional connection and framing are still center stage, methods of persuasion rely more heavily on appealing to logic. The classic definition of persuasion, as defined by Aristotle, is imagine that someone enters a cake baking contest, but they don't have a cake recipe. They put some different ingredients in a bowl, but they don't measure them out or put them in the bowl in any particular order. They're just dumping the flour and the sugar and the butter in and hoping for the best. Grant writing is the same, except for instead of a recipe, you use a logic model or a framework. It uses a persuasive method. There are four methods of effective persuasion that you can use in your grant proposal. The first is the problem solution design. The grant must first convince the reader that is a problem that exists and then prove that their solution will solve the problem. Design by analogy. I love analogies. In this case, the grant uses an analogy to guide your reader to understanding on their own, which is much more powerful than simply telling them the answer. The third is motivated sequence. This is a step by step process of getting your reader's attention, describing the need or the problem, satisfying the need or presenting the solution, visualizing the results, and then requesting action or approval. The fourth is refutative design, and not so much used with grant writing, but it attacks the opposition by pointing out inconsistencies in the argument. Strategy is creating a logical connection. To do so, we use a persuasion map or a framework. The core logic, which is also referred to as the golden thread, is your story about what changes you want to achieve and what is most valuable. The golden thread also ensures that you aren't collecting data just for the sake of it. Instead, the golden thread will give you focus and help you use the outcomes to make better decisions, or what is called outcomes management instead of just measuring outcomes. So here's the framework we're going to use. As you can see, it includes the 5 sections of a grant proposal that we discussed earlier. Pause the video and create this framework to fill out. You can also download this framework using the links in the comments to this video or in the reference section at the end of the video. So far, we have discussed the strategy of organizing your grant proposal. We learned that framing your grant and using a logic-based strategy can help your reader understand your project and feel an emotional connection to it. This helps you get to the of course factor so that when your grant proposal is reviewed, the grant maker will think, of course I want to fund this proposal. Compare this framework to what writers refer to as the story arc. The framework of a grant proposal, when it is organized into the 5 sections we discussed, is very similar to the story arc. Keep the story arc in mind as you write your proposal, because telling a story as you write is going to hook your reader and make your proposal compelling by adding a logical sequence and an emotional connection. Powerful persuasion. Now let's zoom in on section 1, the organizational description. Tell us the history of your organization and include the setting and the characters of your story. How and why did the organization get started? Focus on why your organization is qualified and successful. Imagine someone tells you about a business. It's not doing so well. The business is short on staff, they aren't paying their workers enough, they need new equipment, their board isn't functioning well, and they aren't doing a good job of serving their customers. If this person asked you to invest your savings in their failing business, would you jump in and give them some money? Probably not. Grant makers feel the same way about nonprofit organizations. They want to invest money in nonprofits that are doing well, that are making a positive difference in the community, that are succeeding. To tell a powerful story, the organizational description can focus on how your organization is succeeding. Talk about the team. How are they qualified? Talk about your programs. How are they making a difference in the community? Consider when you will introduce the hero of your story, the individual who will go on a journey, go through a transformation, set out on a quest. This is the person that experiences the problem in your community that your organization is going to help fix. This person should be likable and empowered, someone that your reader can connect to and cheer for. Use empowering language. Your organization is not the savior of your story. Rather, your client is their own savior, and your organization is the setting of the story. Pause for a moment and jot down notes in your framework in the very first column, the organizational description. Let's talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI comes up in grant proposals in 2 primary ways. First, using strength-based language when discussing communities and challenges. And second, grounding your work in equity and justice by discussing staff training as well as community representation and leadership within the organization staff and board, even if the grant proposal doesn't specifically ask for it. In the organizational description section of your proposal, be sure to include information about your organization's commitment to DEI. Explain DEI related policies and procedures, staff training, and how the staff and board reflect the composition of the community. If your community is predominantly white, discuss how your organization specifically seeks out diverse employees and board members to bring in a wide variety of ideas and input. Review your list in the framework column, the organizational description. Does it demonstrate the capacity and the qualifications of your organization? Is your organization a good investment? Let's go back to your so that statement and identify the community need in the statement. In other words, what is the challenge or opportunity in the community that your organization is addressing? In my example about the river, the community need to be addressed is that the river is polluted with trash, which harms wildlife. Without a healthy, clean river, people will not have a place to go to connect with nature and get recreation needed for mental and physical health. And without a healthy river, tourism will decline, which will harm businesses and the local economy. This is the community need that goes in your framework and is the basis of your grant proposal. This is also one of the biggest pitfalls in grant writing because inexperienced grant writers will frame their grant proposal around the needs of the organization instead of the needs of the community. And the needs of the organization are not persuasive. Compare. What if I wrote, Dear Funder, our organization needs more staff, more equipment, better salaries, and a nicer facility. We know it's important to you too that our organization has more staff, better equipment, higher salaries, and a nicer facility. Will you partner with us to fund that? Compare that with Dear Funder, one of the most important resources in our community, the river, is dying from pollution because tourists are littering the river with trash, which kills the wildlife and ruins this beautiful place that so many individuals in our community depend on to connect with nature, to get exercise, and to improve their mental health. We know that protecting the environment and ensuring a strong local economy is important to you too. Will you join us in a partnership to fix this problem? In using storytelling, the community needs section is the rising action of the story. As a persuasive writer, you must build suspense. Your reader needs to feel a little uncomfortable that they don't know what's going to happen next. You create this suspense by controlling the release of the information to your reader. Give your reader a sense of urgency that there's a problem in the community that needs to be fixed right now. Develop your character, the hero of the story, by developing their strengths and their weaknesses. Your character should be relatable so that the reader can imagine the character as someone they know. Their grandmother, the person that served them coffee this morning, their child, their neighbor. Don't provide the solution yet. Hold that until the project description section. Let's talk about DEI. Be sure that when you're describing the community need, you use asset-based and strength-based languages. That means writing in a way that isn't condescending. If your proposal sounds like you know what's better for people than they know themselves, that's the wrong tone. Instead, explain how the community has been involved in identifying the issues, the challenges, and the opportunities in your community. Bring in quotes from community members to amplify their voices. Powerful data is going to level up this section of the proposal. That means citing reputable research. Find some scholarly articles or community need reports that illustrate the points you're trying to make. Every statement that you make in this section should be backed up by research. It's not true just because you said so. I suggest finding at least two reputable sources to cite and combining that with your organization's own internal data. For example, according to the most recent Economic Impact Report on tourism in Greater Palm Springs, California, when tourists spend money locally, tax revenues increase and jobs are sustained. Additionally, the report noted that 1 in 4 jobs, or 22%, are sustained by tourism. And tourism driven tax proceeds helped offset the average household tax burden by $3,719 per household. Here at the Living Desert Zoo, we hosted over 420,000 visitors, helping to contribute to the local economy and reduce household taxes for families in our community. That means that local families paid $3,000 less on their taxes than they otherwise would have, leaving money available for other important financial needs. This example provides cited research combined with the organization's internal data to demonstrate that the local zoo not only helps conservation of the desert through preservation, education, and appreciation, but lowers the tax burden on local families. Jot down your notes for writing this section of your proposal in column 2 of the framework. Specifically, what community need does your organization address, and what research will you cite to back that up? Use APA-style citations in your grant proposal. A resource for APA-style citations is included in the reference at the end of this video. Now that you've filled out your framework, let's go back and read your list. Is the need that the project will address an organizational need or a community need? Where will you find research to support your community need statement? And what internal data will you use to demonstrate your organization's understanding of the problem? Now that you've built suspense, your reader is ready for your solution. This is the ask. First, as succinctly as you can, let the reader know what funds are being sought for and why the request is important right now. And remember to frame it as helping the community, not your organization. We are requesting a grant in X amount to provide access to after school tutoring support for youth with low incomes. Specifically, funds will be used to add additional tutors to the program to meet the demand. This request is urgent due to the growing waitlist we have from families who need support. Second, detail the funding plan. It should have the following elements, and this order works really well. First, the total amount of money needed for your project, which includes this grant request. Two, the amount of money that you've raised so far. This could be funds from individual donations, earned income, maybe special events. It's great if this number is not zero, even if it's a brand new project, because if this project is as important as you say it is, the organization should have already allocated some funding towards it. Three, the remaining amount needed. Do the math for your reader. Subtract the amount that's been raised so far from the project total. Four, the amount of this request from this grant maker. And five, finally, how will you raise the remaining funds? More grant writing, sponsorships, a rummage sale, Facebook donation drive? You need to have a plan. Remember that grant makers don't like to be treated like ATMs. The tone in this section is appreciative, respectful, and it refers to the investment in your organization as a partnership. Balanced budgets. This section of the proposal coincides with the project budget, with line items of all the income and expenses that go into your project. It's critical that your budget is balanced. That means that the amount of your income is equal to the amount of your expenses. Note that a budget is a prediction. It is an organization's best guess based on research of what it's going to cost to complete the project or run the program for a year. Plus, it's the best guess based on research of where funding will come from for the project or the program. Put on your grant reviewer hat. You're reviewing a grant, and the projected income for this project is $130,000. That includes this grant request for $20,000. The total expenses for the project are $100,000. So the organization currently has 110,000 in place for a $100,000 project. As a grant reviewer, you might ask, why do they need another 20,000? What are they going to do with that money? Because it certainly isn't needed for this project. You're probably not going to fund this proposal. That was an example of a project budget surplus. But let's look at it the opposite way. What if your project budget has a huge deficit? Take this example. You're reviewing a grant and the projected income is 130,000, which includes this grant request for 20,000. But this time the total expenses for the project are 200,000. So the organization has $110,000 in place, but it still needs $90,000 more. As a grant reviewer, you might ask, where are they going to get the rest of this money? If there's no indication in the proposal that there's a plan to fundraise the remainder needed, you're probably not going to fund this proposal. One more time with the project budget, and this time it's the best case scenario. You're going to review a proposal. The projected income is 130,000, which includes this grant request for 20,000. The total expenses for the project this time are 130,000. In other words, the organization currently has $110,000 in place and it needs another 20,000 to fully fund the project and move forward as planned. You're much more likely to fund this proposal. Remember, you need to have a fundraising plan to fully fund the project. That includes the current grant request. This is a balanced budget. The ask is the section of the grant proposal in which you make your request for funding. In our story arc, you establish the setting and character by describing your organization's qualifications and resources. You convinced your reader that your organization is ready and capable. In the community needs section, the tension grew as you described the problem or opportunity in your community. You resisted writing about how you will solve this problem, except for maybe a little foreshadowing. The ask is the climax of the story and the highlight of your grant. Find the right tone and keep the ask focused on the community needs rather than the organizational needs. Lay out the fundraising plan and what you have raised so far. Let's talk about DEI as it applies to this section of the proposal. To show your organization's commitment to DEI, your budget might include line items for board and staff training, staff recruitment, or even stipends for engaged community members. Let's go back to your framework and use your framework to map out this section before you write it in your proposal. Use column 3, the project budget, and list out the main categories of your projected income and your projected expenses. Do your research ahead of time for each line item request. Don't just guess. This needs to be as accurate as possible. This is the most scrutinized section of the grant proposal, and your reader will know if you threw together numbers and take it as a sign that the project is not really that important to you after all. Now I'm going to give you a pro tip. Let your reader know what you would do if you received even more money than you requested or if you receive less money. With additional funding, we'll serve even more youth. With less funding, we'll still be able to serve more children than we're currently serving. And we'll continue to fundraise because this project is important. We want every child to be able to get the tutoring help they need to help them succeed in school and in life. You may be surprised at how many times nonprofit organizations get a larger amount than requested because they let the grant maker know what they would do with additional funding. Let's go back and read your list in the framework budget column. Is your project budget balanced? Does it include line items for DEI? project description is the falling action of the story. No more surprises, no more suspense. It's time to get down to the nuts and bolts of your grant proposal. Focus this section on answering the reader's questions before they knew they had any. Describe the plan for carrying out the project step by step. Describe what the client experiences from the moment they walk in the door. Include a work plan, a timeline, and describe the team that are responsible for the work. How are they qualified? Also, include information on how you're going to collect data to evaluate the project and describe how each milestone leads to success. You will want to know if the project is on track each quarter rather than waiting to the end of the project to measure success. So think about that as you create your work plan and your timeline. Let's talk about DEI as it applies to this section of the proposal. Describe your organization's commitment to DEI efforts by explaining how those who have been affected by the problem have been involved in determining the solution. When key stakeholders are a part of the solution, your project is much more likely to be successful. Your approach or strategy for addressing the community need should be based on a partnership with community members. Describe the leadership roles community members will have in the solution. Take out your framework and let's look at the column for the project description in yellow. There are three columns: strategy, overarching goal, and SMARTY objectives. Let's talk about each of these columns and how to use them to continue the golden thread through your framework to form a persuasive proposal. Look at the resources and the qualifications you listed in the first column and compare them to what you listed in the community need column. Based on those resources, what is your best strategy? Perhaps the research that you found discussed some best or promising practices for addressing that community need. The strategy is the bridge that connects these columns to the goal of the project. So, what is your overarching goal of the project? Be sure to frame this as a community need, not an organizational need. Your goal is not to hire more staff or raise more money. Your goal is to help people or provide better services. How you frame your proposal is critical. Your one overarching goal should demonstrate that your organization has a vision for the future based on the mission of your organization. For example, our goal is to prepare high school students for college or increase recycling to reduce the impact of climate change. Or maybe our goal is to help more individuals get living wage jobs. It's also critical that your project description is understandable. That means knowing what not to include as much as what to include. For example, as you're describing your project, you consider including information about your organization's policies and procedures around data security. This includes information about how the data is password protected, how client information is coded to protect identity, and the process for safely disposing of client data from 10 years ago. Unless the grant maker specifically asked for this information, they're likely going to fall asleep or lose interest in the proposal reading about this. Your job as a grant writer is to disseminate what information the reader wants to know and what information is unnecessarily complicated. Consider a plane's cockpit. There are instrument panels covering the cockpit. For the pilot, these instruments are not complicated. They may be complex, but a pilot is trained as to what the instruments do and how to operate the plane. Just as operating a car is simple to you, it's complex, not complicated. As you write your project description, strive to write it in a way that is understandable to your reader while still emphasizing the qualifications of your organization. Always write at an eighth grade level, but with super sophisticated ideas. Your work isn't easy, it's complex, but because your organization is qualified, your team knows what to do step by step to reach success. If you don't include enough detail about the plan, your reader might assume that your work is simple or has less value. An organization that describes their work as complex yet understandable is going to be more successful. Describe your work plan, your timeline, your milestones, the qualifications, and the roles of your team. Let's look at the last column on the framework in this project description section, the SMARTY objectives. You may have heard the term SMART objectives before. That is, objectives that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time limited. Objectives are different than the overarching goal in the previous column of the framework. Objectives specify how you will achieve the goal. For example, in order to meet the goal of helping more individuals get living wage jobs, you might set an objective to outreach and recruit at least 10 individuals to enroll in a skilled trade apprenticeship by the end of the year by identifying individuals interested in learning a trade that are currently participating in the employment training program. The objective is specific because it specified how the individuals would be identified for the project. It's measurable because it specified at least 10 individuals. It's achievable because it makes sense that some individuals in the employment training program would be interested in learning a trade. It's realistic because individuals who learn a skilled trade will earn a living wage. And the objective is time limited because it specified that they would be recruited by the end of the year. The I and the E of the SMARTY objectives have been added for inclusion and equity. If you have an outcome that doesn't specifically promote equity and inclusion, you can add it into the process for achieving it. For example, going back to the apprenticeship objective, to make it inclusive, you could add that individuals in the training program would be consulted for feedback on the program before finalizing it. And to make it equitable, one could add that at least 50% of those selected would be persons of color. Pause the video now and jot down your ideas for the SMARTY objectives in this objective column. So how do you level up this section of your proposal? Powerful imagery. Your goal is to allow the reviewer to picture the program in their head easily without confusion. The reviewer probably doesn't know anything about your organization or program, so be sure that there are not any missing pieces in your description. To incorporate imagery into your persuasive writing, show, don't tell. Take the tone out of the abstract and use real life examples to make your proposal more gripping and memorable. Add powerful quotes to put the reader into the story. For example, a program providing human services shares the voice of a mother. She writes, "I'm leaving empty boxes of food in the cupboard so my kids won't know how bad things are." Or, "My kids are eating at their friend's home more often as they can get meals there that I can barely provide." These examples incite your imagination. You can see the empty boxes of food in the cupboard. The way the mother feels is palpable. This is powerful imagery. Let's review. Review the community need column of the framework. Do the strategies, goals, and objectives address the community need that you listed? Review the project budget. Does it include line items that connect to the program outcomes? If not, go back and edit. Remember, grant writing is a process. Perfection is not the goal when you're writing, excellence is. The evaluation and closing of the proposal is the resolution of the story. This is the part of the grant proposal that explains to your reader how success will be measured and prepares you for writing grant reports that are required once you receive the grant. If the SMARTY objectives you wrote are solid, you already have a strong foundation to work from. Going back to those objectives, tell the reader how you will determine whether your project was successful and explain in detail your plans for data collection and analysis. Let's talk about the difference between goals, objectives, outputs, and outcomes, because in the evaluation section, we're going to add outputs and outcomes to demonstrate the success of the program. We noted earlier that the goal is the overarching aim, generally not specific enough to measure. Objectives are the specific achievements that contribute toward reaching the goal. You wrote and included your SMARTY objectives in the project description. Outputs are tangible deliverables from your project. Outcomes are changes in behavior, attitudes, perception, knowledge, or skills. To better understand these terms, let's imagine that you're growing a strawberry patch in your backyard and you want to make a better one than the ones you've grown in the previous years. Your goal would be to grow your best ever strawberry patch. It is not measurable, but it is your aim to have a better strawberry patch than you've ever had before. You may have several objectives that will contribute to your goal. For example, your objectives could be grow at least 3 pounds more fruit than last year's harvest. Reduce the amount of fruit loss to slugs by at least 2 pounds. And finally, to grow strawberries that taste better than store-bought strawberries as determined by a taste test with your neighbors. While each objective follows the SMART model, not every goal may be obviously achievable. You may want to explain why you think you will save at least 2 pounds of fruit from slugs compared to last year. Maybe you researched more effective pest control. Information like this helps your reviewer know that the goal is ambitious, but reasonably achievable, and helps your reader understand your strategy. Now let's talk about outcomes. Your outcomes for the best ever strawberry patch might be learn which strawberry varieties work best in your garden, or develop practices for pest control that are effective in your garden. These are changes in knowledge about growing strawberries. Your outputs for the project could be a fruit production summary report, or an after-season assessment of project and methods with recommendation for next year, or summary rating data from taste tests. Outputs are the deliverables of your project. The outcomes and outputs are what the grant maker can expect to learn in your grant reports. Together, they provide quantitative and qualitative information. The pounds of strawberries grown is quantitative. The way the strawberries taste is qualitative. We want the grant proposal to have both quantitative and qualitative measures. At its core, evaluation is designed to improve something, and it provides a basis for decision making. What that means is that the results of the evaluation should be used to continuously improve your project or program and help your team make decisions about the work. How well does the program work? There are three types of evaluation methods that are typically required by grant makers: a formative or process evaluation, a summative or outcome evaluation, and finally, an impact evaluation. As you can see from this slide, the difference to these types of evaluation is directly related to the stage your project is in. If you're starting a new project or program, your evaluation will ask if your project was developed as intended. It may assess the initial project activities and continues through implementing the project. It provides new insights into improving the outcomes of the project. If your project is ongoing, you will likely use a summative or outcome evaluation. This type of evaluation asks how well the project did in reaching the stated goals and objectives. Where the process evaluation details how the data will be collected, the outcome evaluation presents the information that was collected. An impact evaluation is less likely to be used because a grant period is usually a year, and an impact evaluation measures the long-term results of the project beyond the project period. To level up the evaluation section of your proposal, use the evaluation to demonstrate powerful impact. Grant makers want statistics that demonstrate success. Ask yourself what means more to you. If I said, the program served 20 individuals, or if I said, 18 out of 20 individuals who participated in the program moved into permanent housing and remained stable in their new homes after 6 months. The first one is an output. The second is an outcome, and it provides statistics on how well the program is working. To develop an evaluation plan, let's follow these steps. Collect information. Conduct a measurement by comparing 2 points of data. Analyze the information, drawing conclusions from the results of that measurement. Report the results to your project team and the grant maker. And finally, incorporate those results back into the project design. Use the information to improve the program moving forward. Finally, let's look at some varieties of evaluation tools. Considering these options might give you more ideas for your evaluation plan. The first is a survey. This is a written interview that collects one-time information. The second is a pre and post test. This is a tool that is used at the beginning and the end of the program to compare changes in knowledge or skills as a result of the project. Interview. Interview is a conversation in which a trained facilitator collects sensitive information. Focus groups. An interview in which a trained facilitator gathers information from the group. This is a great tool for settings that involve youth or need to be conducted in the group's native language. Journals. Logs, journals, and diaries are monitoring tools for recording data over long periods of time. Because they rely on timely and accurate documentation of an ongoing process, they must be completed close to the event. And finally, direct observation. Often used to look for a specific behavior, an example would be monitoring animals in a shelter for stress and comfort. Be creative when considering the use of evaluation tools. I love this example of an arts program in which an artist works with young children. To determine if the project is a success, she and the teacher watch the children for two behaviors once they've completed the project. One, the children hold their art close to their heart, or two, they show their art to a friend. These signs are interpreted as being proud of their work. Let's talk about DEI as it applies to this section of the grant proposal, the evaluation. The evaluation should be culturally relevant and provide the community with information that it finds meaningful and actionable. In order to accomplish this, participants in the program and other key stakeholders should have input into the evaluation. What does success look like to them? Including DEI efforts in your evaluation means that your organization must take time to build relationships with the community you serve and the individuals who participate in the program. The quality of these relationships are key to ensuring that your evaluation is learning with the community. As noted by the Equitable Evaluation Initiative in their report, Shifting Evaluation Paradigm, positioning the organization as the only experts creates and perpetuates a power imbalance. Instead, organizations should embrace being a learner, recognizing the community and the participants as community experts and partners in the evaluation. To close your grant proposal, remind your reader of the elements of your persuasive argument. Restate the purpose of your grant proposal and the outcomes that can be expected if you receive funding. End in a hopeful and action oriented tone that lets your reader know that you're ready to move forward. Pause this video and jot down your ideas for your evaluation in the evaluation column of your framework. Detail how you will determine if each SMARTY objective was successful. Then, in the impact column, jot down what will be different in 10 years as a result of your project. Review the community need column. Does the evaluation plan impact the community need that you described? Does the impact statement connect to the goal column? Review the budget column. Did expenses come up as you wrote the evaluation section that need to be added to the project budget? Review the project description. Do you need to make any adjustments to your SMARTY objectives as a result of thinking through the evaluation plan? And most important, does a golden thread connect each section of the proposal in a logical way? In this video, we learned about the importance of framing and strategy in grant writing. Based on the theory of Kahneman and Tversky on fast and slow thinking, we recognize that people's decisions can be swayed by how a situation or a grant proposal is framed. If a person likes something, they're more likely to invest in it. If a person has an emotional connection to something, they're more likely to take an interest in it. Because of this, we strive to write our grant proposals in a way that help people form a connection to what we're writing about. In fact, when a person can see a logical connection between something they know, they like, or feel an emotional connection to, the more likely they are going to want to be a part of it or fund it. Then we talked through each of the 5 sections of a grant proposal and how to level up each section with powerful strategies. By understanding the 4 methods of persuasion, we know how important it is to use a framework to map out our grant proposal so that a golden thread connects each section of the proposal. Using the story arc, we plotted how to incorporate suspense into our proposal to further increase its persuasiveness. To amplify the voices of those that we serve and dismantle the power imbalance inherent in philanthropy, we strategized how to incorporate your organization's DEI efforts into your grant proposal. And finally, we reviewed the importance of creating powerful statistics to demonstrate success. Many times people think that grants are easy and free money. They're not. Grants take time and resources to write, submit, manage, and report on. Further, grants are not free money. Rather, the grant is a contract. The funds must be used for the purpose outlined and agreed upon beforehand. Most importantly, The best way to learn to write grants is to practice and have someone give you feedback on your writing. You can ask the grant maker to provide feedback on your proposal writing, or you can take a course in grant writing that includes receiving feedback on your writing. And finally, check out the resources list at the end of this video to help you stay inspired and improve your writing. This video was brought to you by Travel Oregon and Spark the Fire grant writing classes.